Hello, welcome to Shark Finger. It's Shadow here, and today I'll be walking you through making as simple of a game as I can think of. The entire game is you roll a ball around and collect 10 pickups which act like coins in a Mario game. When you pick up each one, it prints your score to the console down at the bottom, and when you've collected all 10, it prints you win to the console. So let's get into it. First we need to create a scene, so click 3D Scene. Now we need to create an empty node to organize our environment in. So let's create node 3D, double click to rename it, and let's rename it to environment. Now we need to create a CSG box 3D, and this will be our floor. So let's rename it to floor. Then hit R on the keyboard to change to the scale tool, and let's scale it down to be somewhat flat, and let's make it wider. I'm going for about 5 by 5 so that it's about a square. So there. Now we want to make sure we're in the Inspector tab. Click Use Collision. Go to the Material, click on the drop down, give it a new standard material 3D. Click on the sphere, and then go down to the Albedo tab. Click on the color to change the color. You can change it however you want with the slider and moving this around. However, I'm going to just give it a blue color. Click outside of it when you're done, then right-click the sphere, click Save As, and name it whatever you want. I'm just going to name it blue for simplicity's sake. Next, we need to create another CSG box. This will be our wall. We need to scale it down so that it is thinner and shorter, but we want to make it as wide as we can. Also, I forgot to mention, you can move around the scene and look around the scene by holding right click and moving the mouse around, and by pressing WASD while holding it down. Then you press W to switch back to the position tool, and let's move it up and over to the end. Then we want to drag our material to the material slot, turn on Use Collision, and there's our wall. Now we need 3 more, so let's duplicate it with Control D, move it to the other end, duplicate it again, and this time we want it to be centered, so we want to go to Transform, change our Z axis or Z axis, depending on where you're from, to 0. Then we want to rotate on the y-axis 90 degrees, and let's move it to the left side, and then duplicate it once more to move it to the right side. And there's our environment. We can now save the scene. I'm just going to call it Scene. Click Play, select the current scene to play through, and as you can see, we can't see anything. So, we need to add a camera. Add camera 3D. Then let's move it back and up. Hit E to change to the rotate tool so that it is looking down on it. And then we can use this preview checkbox to see what it'll look like. I think that's fine, so I'm going to leave it there, but it's up to you. Now we can save the scene again, play it to see how it looks, and it's quite dark, so we need to add a light. Search for light, and add a directional light 3D. This will add light to everything, or shine light on everything that it is pointing towards, regardless of where the light is. So E to rotate, point it down, and I'm going to angle it a bit. Finally, save the scene, click play, and that should be our environment, all lit up and all set up. So now we need a player. So let's create a rigid body 3D, rename it to player, and now the rigid body exists, but it doesn't have any colliders, it can't interact with anything. So it's a physics object that basically doesn't exist. So to fix that, we need to add a collision shape 3D as a child of the player and set its shape to a sphere. Then we need to be able to see the player, so let's add a CSG sphere. and then we want to move it up so that it doesn't start in the floor. And then to set up 4 when we are picking stuff up, let's go to the solver, change max contacts to 3, and turn on contact monitoring. Then we want to add a script. For this one we're using C#, so let's change it to C# and create the script. Now it should load up here. We can start off by deleting everything in the class because we don't really need anything in the class. And we want a place to store our speed, so let's give it a private float speed equals 10f. Then we need a place to store our movement inputs, so private vector3 movement. Now we need to call a function that is called everyPhysicsTick to get our input and apply the physics to the rigid body. So we use public override void physics process. And you can delete the base dot whatever. In here we need to get our input, but we need to set up input maps first so that Godot knows what keys go to what inputs. So go back to Godot, go to Project, Project Settings, Input Map, click on the Add action, and let's add a Move Forward action, and then you can either press Enter or click Add, and repeat this for Move Back, Move Left, and Move Right. Now we have the actions, but they aren't bound to anything, so we click this plus. I'm going to do W for forward. You can just press any key and it'll, or any button on a controller and it'll map it. Then click OK. I'm going to do S for back, A for left, and D for right. Now we can close this, go back to our script, and we want to apply our forward and back movement or inputs to the movement. So we want to do movement.z equals input.getAxis move forward and move back. Which what this function does is anytime the move forward input is pressed, it'll return -1, and anytime the move back input is pressed, it'll return +1. Now we need to do the same for our left and right, so we write movement.x equals input.getAxis move left and move right. Now we get the movement and we store it, but we haven't applied it as a force to the ball. So we need to write apply central force movement, and then we want to control its speed, so we multiply the movement by speed. Now if we save it, go back to Godot, run the project, and if we try to move around, you can see that we can roll the ball just fine now, and it can't easily get out of the environment. So now we need to do the pickups. So let's start by creating an empty node to store them in. So node 3D, let's rename it to pickups. Then let's create a CSG box. Any of the shapes should work for this, so you can use anything you want. I'm just going to keep it simple with a box. Let's rename it to pickup. Let's go to transform, scale it on all axes down to be smaller. I'm going to give it a 0.25 scale. Go back up, use collision. Let's give it a new material, following the same steps as before. This one I'm going to go for a kind of goldish color, but again you can go with anything you want. Save the material as a pickup, and then we want to move the object around a bit, and then duplicate them until there are 10, and move those around however you see fit. Now, we need to be able to pick them up, so we need to add all of them, go to the node, go to groups, and add them to pickups. You could have duplicated them before, I forgot to mention that, so I'm just going to copy and paste and add all of these in. And what I meant by that is if you duplicate it once they're in the group, all of the duplicates will share the group. So now, to write the pickup logic, we go back to our player script. First, we need a place to store our score, so we will do private int score. And then we need a function that is called when the rigid body hits something new. So we write private void on body entered, and then we pass it the node that was hit. Now we check if the node is a pickup with if node.isInGroup pickup. And if it is, we add a point to score by incrementing it. Then we destroy the pickup with node.queue_free. Then we print the score to the console with debug.print score.toString. Now we want to check if the score is greater than or equal to 10. So we go if score is greater than or equal to 10, and if it is, we print you win to the console. Now we need to tie this function to the signal of the rigid body hitting something, so we tie it when the object is initialized with public override void ready. This is called when the object is first initialized, and then we tie it to the signal with body entered plus equals on body entered. Now if we save it, go back to Godot, play it. I'll move this up so that you can see. When we hit an object, you can see it prints our score to the console, and then when we collect all of them, it prints you win to the console. Now that you have a working game, feel free to play around with it however you want, though bumping up the speed of the player might be fun to mess around with, and it also might be fun to make an obstacle course to get all the pickups. Anyways, thanks for watching. If this tutorial was helpful, leave a like. And if you want to follow along with my game's progress or want to keep up with any other tutorials I put out, consider subscribing. So see ya and have a good rest of your day.